To escape his engagement, a millionaire marries a homeless girl, but her true identity shocks his world. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain poured down in silver sheets against the windshield of a black Bentley parked under a flickering street lamp. Inside, Ethan Cole, 32, the youngest CEO in Manhattan's tech circle, sat in silence. The glow of his phone screen illuminated the hard lines of his face, sharp jaw, tired eyes, and a tension that came from years of doing what others expected. On the screen, a text blinked again. Dinner with the Fairchild family. Do not be late. The engagement announcement is tonight. He exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that feels like defeat. His father's voice echoed in his head, cold, practical, full of legacy. You marry her, Ethan. It is not about love. It is about the company. But love was exactly the problem. He had none left for that world. He looked out the rain-speckled window, the city blurred like watercolor. Then, through the downpour, he saw her. A young woman sat on the edge of the bus stop bench, her coat soaked through, hair plastered to her face. She held a paper cup of coffee with both hands, as if clinging to its last bit of warmth. Her sneakers were torn, her fingers red from the cold, but her eyes, tired yet unbroken, met his for the briefest second. Something inside Ethan shifted. He opened the car door. The chill slapped his face, mixing with the smell of wet asphalt. The woman looked up, startled, as he approached. His suit was immaculate, his tone calm but strange. You do not belong out here in this weather, he said. She blinked, wary. I am fine, just waiting for the last bus. He studied her. No makeup, no pretension, just honesty and exhaustion wrapped in a rain-soaked hoodie. A thought flashed in his mind, reckless, desperate, and yet, somehow, freeing. What if, he said quietly, you did not have to wait anymore? She frowned. Excuse me? He took a breath, every word sounding absurd, even to himself. I need a wife. Just for 3 months. You will have food, a place to stay, and whatever money you need. In return, you help me end something I do not want. She stared at him, the rain sliding down her cheeks like tears. Is this some kind of joke? Ethan shook his head. No, I am serious. The city hummed in the background, the sound of cars, thunder, and 2 strangers standing under a trembling streetlight. The world might have called it madness, but for Ethan Cole, it was the first real choice he had made in years. And for the girl who had nothing left to lose, it was the moment her life began to change forever. The following morning, the storm had cleared, but New York still looked washed out, its streets slick and silver beneath the pale sunlight. Ethan Cole sat at the long oak table of his penthouse, untouched coffee growing cold beside a stack of unopened messages. His phone kept vibrating news outlets speculating about the canceled engagement, his father's assistant demanding an explanation. He ignored them all. His mind was still replaying the night before, the way the rain had fallen, the disbelief in the girl's eyes when he had asked her to marry him. Every logical part of him said it was insanity. Yet for the first time in years, he had felt something like control. He reached for the signed contract that had arrived by courier before dawn. The ink was still fresh, a brief agreement between 2 strangers, Ethan Cole and Mia Hart. 3 months, no physical contact, no publicity. Mutual silence once the arrangement ended. She would receive housing, food, and a stipend. He would receive freedom from the engagement that had chained him to a business deal. Across town, Mia stood in front of a cracked bathroom mirror inside a small shelter for women. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. Her fingers trembled as she touched the paper. Ethan had given her a copy of the contract. She had read it a dozen times, each line sounding more surreal than the last. For the first time in months, she had slept indoors, in clean sheets. Still, her chest ached with guilt. Who agrees to marry a stranger? And yet she could not ignore the truth. She needed this. Her friend, Mrs. Doyle, an elderly woman from the shelter, was waiting for a surgery that charity programs had denied for lack of funds. The amount Ethan offered could save her. Mia folded the contract carefully and whispered to her reflection, 3 months, just 3 months. By afternoon, A car arrived for her. The driver said nothing as they moved through the city, past glittering towers and crowds that never looked down. When the elevator doors opened to the top floor of Cole Tower, the contrast nearly took her breath away. Marble floors, glass walls, the scent of cedar and money. Ethan stood near the window, suit perfectly tailored, expression unreadable. He glanced at her small suitcase, then at her worn sneakers. "You do not have to look afraid," he said evenly. "This is just business." She met his eyes, steadying her voice. "Maybe for you. For me, this is everything." For a second, something flickered behind his calm facade. Guilt, perhaps, or curiosity. He gestured toward the folder on the table. "Sign this one. It makes it official." 0. Her pen scratched the paper, sealing her fate. He closed the folder, then turned toward the large floor-to-ceiling windows where the city glowed beneath them. "You will move into the guest room," he said. "There will be staff to help you. No interviews, no appearances unless I say so." Mia nodded silently. Outside, a gust of wind swept through the skyline, scattering faint sunlight over the glass. Neither of them noticed how, at that very moment, something fragile and dangerous had already begun a story that would blur the line between pretending and feeling, between contract and choice. The following evening, the city's skyline burned gold as the sun dipped behind the glass towers. Inside the penthouse, Mia Hart sat stiffly on the edge of a velvet chair, hands clasped, trying not to stare at the world that surrounded her. The living room was larger than the entire shelter she had stayed in. Every corner gleamed crystal chandeliers, framed art, books arranged like museum pieces. She felt out of place, like a shadow in someone else's life. Across the room, Ethan Cole stood beside his attorney, Mr. Grant, reviewing the final legal papers that would define the strange relationship they were about to live. Grant's tone was neutral, but his eyes betrayed curiosity as he read aloud the clauses one by one. Clause 1. This union shall remain private, lasting a duration of 90 days. Clause 2. No romantic involvement shall be expected or implied. Clause 3. Each party retains personal privacy. Clause 4. No photographs, press statements, or public appearances without mutual consent. Mia's pulse quickened. Each sentence sounded colder than the one before. When Grant slid the pen across the table toward her, she hesitated. Ethan noticed but said nothing. "You may add any condition you wish," Grant offered politely. She swallowed. "Just one. When this is over, no one gets hurt." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he gave a short nod. Agreed. Her hand shook as she signed the pages, the scratch of the pen echoing in the quiet room. When she finished, Ethan signed his name beside hers, his handwriting precise and controlled. Grant gathered the documents, placed them into a leather folder, and left without another word. The silence that followed was thick. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the homeless girl and the millionaire who had bought 3 months of her life. Ethan finally broke the stillness. "The staff will show you to your room. Dinner is at 7. Dress formally." Mia stood, clutching the hem of her thrift store sweater. "You do not need to remind me that I do not belong here." He turned toward her, voice measured. "You belong here as long as the contract says you do. Nothing more, nothing less." She met his eyes, calm but firm. "Then I will play my part." For a brief second, his composure slipped. There was something in her tone, a quiet dignity that did not fit the label of charity case. He looked away, adjusting his cufflinks, and walked toward his study. Later that night, alone in the guest room, Mia placed her small suitcase by the bed and stared at the city lights through the window. Somewhere out there were the streets she had walked barefoot in the rain. Now she was surrounded by silk and silence. She reached into her pocket and touched a small silver pendant, her mother's, the only thing she had kept through everything. In the hallway, Ethan paused outside her door, hearing the faint creak of floorboards. He almost knocked, then stopped himself. The contract was clear. Distance was safety. But as he walked away, one thought lingered uninvited. Why does she make this place feel less empty? Neither of them knew that the signature inked on paper that night was only the beginning of something that would test every rule they had written. Morning sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the Cole penthouse, warm but distant. Mia Hart stood in front of a full-length mirror, clutching the edge of a silk gown that shimmered like liquid gold. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, pinned her hair with quick, precise motions, whispering encouragement. "Hold still, dear." Mr. Cole asked that you look elegant for tonight's dinner. The press might attend. Mia forced a smile. Elegant? I'm just trying not to look like an imposter. Mrs. Lane smiled kindly. Everyone in this city is pretending to be something, sweetheart. Some are just better dressed while doing it. When Mrs. Lane left, Mia exhaled and stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the girl who had shivered under a streetlight just days ago. Her eyes were the same, but everything else, makeup, fabric, posture, belonged to another life. Downstairs, Ethan Cole reviewed a file, while his stylist adjusted his tie. His assistant reminded him about the upcoming charity gala. People will expect to see your wife, she said. It would calm the investors after the canceled engagement. He nodded, distracted. Have the car ready at 7. But his mind was elsewhere on the faint tremor in Mia's hand, when she had signed the contract, and the way she had said, "No one gets hurt." That evening, when Mia descended the grand staircase, Ethan looked up and froze. For a brief second, the world seemed to blur the city lights outside, the clinking of crystal, even the hum of distant conversation. She looked effortless. Not like a guest in his world, but as if she had always belonged there. He stood, offering his arm. Ready? She nodded, the soft perfume of gardenia trailing as they walked out together. The gala unfolded in a swirl of camera flashes and murmured gossip. Journalists whispered questions about the mysterious new Mrs. Cole. Ethan's ex-fiancée, Victoria Fairchild, approached with a practiced smile. "So, this is your replacement?" she said sweetly. "I must admit, Ethan, you have a type charity cases." Mia blinked but did not flinch. "You are right," she replied calmly. "He does seem to enjoy helping the less fortunate." The nearby guests gasped softly. Ethan's lips curved, almost a smile. Victoria's painted expression faltered, and she turned away. As the evening continued, Ethan watched Mia move through the room polite, gracious, yet quietly defiant. When an older investor made a dismissive remark about street people, she gently corrected him with a story about the community shelters she used to volunteer at. The room fell silent, impressed. Later, in the limousine, Ethan broke the quiet. "You handled that well." She glanced out the window. "I was not handling it. I was surviving." He studied her reflection in the glass, the softness of her voice, the steel underneath. "You do not need to prove anything to them," he said. "I am not proving it to them," she whispered. "I am proving it to myself." For the first time since the contract began, Ethan did not see a deal or a disguise. He saw a woman who carried her scars like medals. And though the rules were clear, something inside him began to shift again, something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with business. The next few days moved like a quiet storm inside the Cole residence. What had begun as a cold arrangement slowly started to breathe. Mia Hart adapted faster than anyone expected. The staff adored her. She thanked them by name, helped in the kitchen, even repaired a loose button on the driver's sleeve. Every small gesture seemed to ripple through the household, softening walls that had once felt carved from glass. One morning, Ethan Cole stood at the edge of his office, watching her from the balcony below. She was laughing with Mrs. Lane, sunlight spilling through the high windows, her hair catching gold in the light. It had been years since laughter had echoed through that penthouse. He tried to focus on his work, but the sound kept pulling him back. That afternoon, his assistant entered briskly. "Mr. Cole, the board dinner tonight will include the press. You might want your wife to attend. It would look stable." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Have her join me." At 7, the black sedan glided up to the private club downtown. Cameras flared, reporters called his name, and for the first time, Ethan did not face them alone. Mia stepped out beside him, wearing a simple navy gown and a small silver pendant her mother's. It was not glamorous, but under the flash of lights, she looked radiant. Inside, conversation flowed around crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Board members eyed her curiously, whispering among themselves. The chairman, Mr. Rowan, smiled thinly. "Mrs. Cole, I must say, you are nothing like the woman we expected." Mia returned his gaze, steady. "That is probably because you expected someone who would not question you." A few guests chuckled. Ethan's lips curved in a faint smirk. The tension in the room broke like glass under heat. For the first time, she had turned a test into a victory. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Ethan poured 2 glasses of wine. The city hummed below them, a sea of moving lights. He handed her one. "You handled them better than I ever could," he said quietly. She smiled. "Maybe because I have nothing to lose." He looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, he saw not the girl from the bus stop, but a woman with unshakable grace. "You do not talk like someone who has lost much," he said. Mia took a slow breath. "That is because I learned that loss does not define you, it just teaches you what to fight for." The air between them shifted. The rules of their contract still existed, but they suddenly felt small. She set her glass down and stepped closer to the window, the reflection of the city dancing over her face. "Why did you really ask me that night?" she asked softly. "Out of everyone, why me?" Ethan hesitated, the truth catching in his throat. "Because you did not look at me the way everyone else does. You did not see money. You saw a man in the rain." Mia turned to him, eyes glimmering. "Maybe that is because I was standing in it too." The clock ticked quietly in the background. Neither moved, but something invisible between them had begun to change shape, something fragile, inevitable, and far beyond the ink of their contract. The night after the board dinner, Ethan Cole found himself pacing his study long after the city had gone quiet. The contract sat on his desk, its pages marked and folded, a constant reminder of the distance he had promised to keep. But distance was no longer simple. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mia Hart standing beneath the chandelier, her calm defiance softening into a smile that had somehow made the room brighter. He poured himself a glass of water, though what he wanted was something stronger. The truth pressed against his ribs. He was losing control, not of his company, but of himself. Down the hall, Mia sat by her window, her silver pendant glinting faintly in the city's glow. She had learned Ethan's routines, early meetings, late dinners, long silences. Yet there was more to him than the headlines had ever shown. She had seen him set his coffee beside the sleeping housekeeper's station with a note. "Take a break today." She had watched him pause in front of the photograph of his late mother, touching the frame as if apologizing for something unseen. That empathy, buried deep beneath his precision, was what unsettled her the most, because she was starting to care. The next morning, the sky turned gray again, a thin drizzle tracing the windows. Ethan found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, humming softly as she helped Mrs. Lane prepare breakfast. She looked up when he entered. "You do not have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied, smiling, "but it makes me feel normal." He watched her for a long second. "Normal," he repeated quietly. "I barely remember what that feels like." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. The world outside blurred, leaving only the quiet rhythm of the rain and the faint warmth spreading between two people who were never supposed to meet. Later that evening, he found her again on the rooftop terrace. The wind played with her hair as she leaned against the railing, the city stretching endlessly below. "You come up here often," he said. She nodded. "It reminds me that everything looks smaller from a distance, even the things that hurt." "Oh?" He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to a heartbeat. "What hurt you, Mia?" Her voice was steady but soft. "Life. Losing everything you thought was permanent. But I guess that is how you learn what truly matters." He looked at her, the woman he had once seen as an escape plan, now the only thing that made sense. "You talk like someone who has lived 1,000 lives," he said. "Maybe," she whispered. "Maybe I just had to grow up faster than most." "Oh." Silence settled between them, filled with wind and city lights. Ethan wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught. Instead, he reached for his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She froze, startled by the small act of care. Their eyes locked again, closer this time. "You will catch a cold," he said quietly. "You worry too much for a man who does not believe in love," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Maybe that is what worries me." The air shifted, heavy and electric. Neither moved, but the line they had drawn between business and emotion had already begun to fade. And deep down, both knew that from this moment on, nothing between them could ever be just a contract again. The following week, the calm they had built began to crack. News spread through the business world that Ethan Cole's sudden marriage had drawn suspicion from his company's board. Investors demanded answers. Behind closed doors, whispers grew louder, rumors that the mysterious Mrs. Cole had a hidden past. Ethan's assistant entered his office that morning with a pale face and a trembling phone. "Sir, you need to see this." On the screen flashed a tabloid headline. "Millionaire's wife exposed. From homeless shelter to high society fraud." Beneath it were photos of Mia Hart, blurry but cruel, one of her outside a shelter, another of her wearing the same clothes from the night they met. The article called her a manipulator, claiming she had targeted Ethan for money. Ethan's stomach tightened. He knew exactly who had leaked it. Victoria Fairchild, his former fiancée, had powerful friends in the press and every reason to destroy him. That afternoon, he found Mia in the library, holding the same newspaper. Her hands were shaking, her eyes red. "I told you someone would get hurt," she whispered. He stepped closer. "Mia, do not listen to them. They do not know the truth." She lifted her head, meeting his gaze with quiet strength. "But they believe it. And now you will lose everything because of me." "This is not your fault," he said firmly. "It does not matter," she replied. "Your world has rules. I never belonged in it." Her voice broke on the last word. She turned away before he could speak again. By evening, cameras surrounded the building. The company's public relations team begged Ethan to issue a statement or dissolve the marriage before the scandal grew. His father called from London, his tone as cold as ever. "End it, Ethan. You cannot protect her and the company at the same time." He hung up without answering. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. Inside, he stood by the window, staring at the city that had turned against them. Mia packed her small suitcase quietly. She did not cry. Instead, she placed the silver pendant back around her neck and left the signed copy of the contract on the table. When Ethan found it, a note rested on top, written in her neat handwriting. "Thank you for the roof, the warmth, and the lie that almost felt real. You deserve peace, Ethan, even if it is without me." Rain began to fall as he ran downstairs, searching for her, but she was already gone. The security guard said she had left on foot, refusing the driver's help. Hours later, alone in the penthouse, Ethan poured himself a drink and stared at the contract that had started it all. The ink of her signature had smudged slightly from the rain on her hands. For the first time in his life, he realized how empty success felt when the person who made it mean something had disappeared. In the city below, Mia walked through the storm with no umbrella, her coat soaked through, her mind numb. She had promised herself not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Somewhere behind her, the towers of coal industries lit up the night, cold and distant, like a reminder of a life she was never meant to touch. Both of them were trapped in the same storm, two hearts bound by a contract that was never meant to feel like love, now paying the price for the truth they had tried to hide. Days passed, but the city did not stop talking. Every newspaper headline, every business report, carried the same story. Ethan Cole, the man who once ruled with precision, had married a fraud. Investors pulled out. The board called an emergency vote to suspend him as CEO. Yet Ethan refused to speak, refused to give the press what they wanted. He had only one focus: finding Mia Hart. He traced every place she might have gone, the shelters, the charity kitchens, the quiet corners of the city where she used to sit with a sketchbook, but she had vanished. Until one night, an old volunteer at the shelter handed him a folded note. "She told me to give this to you if you ever came back," the woman said softly. Ethan opened it with trembling hands. The note was brief. "Do not look for me. Help the people I left behind instead. That is how you can make it right." Her words hit him harder than any headline. For the first time in his life, he saw what real legacy meant: not the empire he had inherited, but the one built by compassion. Driven by something deeper than guilt, Ethan began to dig into the reports surrounding Mia's past. What he found stopped him cold. The name Mia Hart was not on any criminal record. Instead, it appeared on the founding documents of a small but powerful nonprofit, the Hart Foundation for Second Chances, an organization that had quietly funded shelters and rehabilitation programs across the state. Mia had been one of its original benefactors before disappearing after her family's financial scandal years ago. She had never been a fraud. She had been a woman hiding from a world that once betrayed her. The revelation hit the media the following morning like a tidal wave. Ethan called a press conference, ignoring his advisor's warnings. Under the bright lights, he stood tall but weary, holding the pendant she had left behind. "You have all heard stories about my wife," he began. "You were told she used me, that she deceived me. But the truth is, I am the one who never deserved her trust. Mia Hart is not a fraud. She is the founder of the Hart Foundation, a woman who gave everything she had to help people like the one she once was. I will spend the rest of my life continuing her work." The room fell silent. Reporters lowered their cameras. For the first time, Ethan's voice carried no arrogance, only conviction. That night, he visited one of the shelters under Mia's foundation. Inside, volunteers moved quietly between rows of beds. And there she was, Mia, wearing a plain gray sweater, helping a young woman fill out a job application. She froze when she saw him. He took a step forward, drenched from the rain. "You were right," he said softly. "You did save me, Mia, just not the way I expected." Her eyes shimmered, unsure whether to believe him. "Why are you here, Ethan?" she asked. "To give back what you gave me, to finish what you started." He reached into his pocket and revealed a simple ring, the one from their contract, now cleaned of the ink stains. "This time," he said, voice trembling, "no contracts, no lies, just truth." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, she smiled. The same gentle smile he had seen in the rain the night they met. Outside, thunder faded into a calm drizzle, as if the storm that had torn them apart had finally passed. In that quiet, surrounded by the hum of hope, Ethan knew that the story they had written by mistake was finally becoming real. The next morning, soft sunlight poured through the tall windows of the shelter's common room. The storm was gone, leaving behind streets that smelled of rain and renewal. Ethan Cole stood near the door, watching Mia Hart serve breakfast to a group of women and children. She moved with quiet grace, laughter returning to her face little by little, like sunlight finding its way through clouds. When she noticed him watching, she walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. "You should not be here so early," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "I could say the same to you. You have not stopped since dawn." Mia shrugged, her expression soft. "These people need someone who shows up." He stepped closer. "So do I." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The distance that once defined them had disappeared. The city outside still hummed, but the only sound between them was the rhythm of their breathing, steady and calm. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "You gave me a reason to change, Mia. You reminded me what integrity looks like. I used to think leadership meant power, but now I know it means service. You taught me that." Her eyes widened as he opened the box. Inside was the same ring she had once signed for a symbol of their fake marriage. But now, the diamond had been replaced with a simple silver band engraved with 2 words, "Second Chance." He took her hand, his voice steady but full of emotion. "This is not about contracts or saving reputations. It is about starting again with truth this time. I cannot promise perfection, but I can promise to stand beside you, through the storms and the sunlight. Will you give me that chance?" Mia looked down at the ring, tears forming in her eyes. She smiled softly. "You already have it." He slid the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, it felt real. Around them, the morning light grew brighter, reflecting off the windows like gold. The volunteers nearby clapped quietly, some smiling through tears. Weeks later, the headlines told a new story. Cole Foundation and Hart Foundation merged to launch the Second Chance Initiative, providing homes and jobs for thousands. But for Ethan and Mia, it was never about headlines. It was about purpose. On the day of the foundation's opening ceremony, Ethan stood before the crowd, Mia beside him. Cameras flashed, but his gaze never left her. "Once, I built towers out of pride," he said into the microphone. "Now, I hope to build bridges out of compassion. Every success I have from this day forward carries her name." Applause filled the air as he turned to her, their hands clasping tightly. That evening, as the city lights flickered on and the first stars appeared, they walked through the garden behind the new foundation building. The air was cool, calm, and alive with the scent of wet earth. Mia looked up at the sky and whispered, "Funny, is it not? It all began with a rainstorm." "Oh," Ethan smiled. "The best things usually do." He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. In that quiet moment, under the soft glow of the city, the story that had begun as a lie ended as a promise proof that even from the most unlikely beginnings, love can find its way home.